Welcome to the Miles to Zen podcast. Today, I am so thrilled to bring a guest who I think has become famous. His name's Dan Goerke, and I hope I'm saying that right. Dan is an absolutely beautiful human. He can communicate telepathically with people who have Alzheimer's. He's a Reiki master. He's a commercial real estate guru, and he's a volunteer with the Alzheimer's Association. And I am just thrilled to have you on the podcast today, Dan.
Oh, Shannon, it's great to be here. Thank you very much for having me.
Is there anything and he's also an author.
Yes, yes. It's interesting as you're going through the list, you mentioned the real estate, and that is something that has just waned as I've gotten busier and busier with the book and doing readings, telepathic readings for other people. You said real estate, and I go like, oh yeah, I forgot I did that.
Right? It's part of the package that is you, and whether it's past or something that may come up again, it still probably has informed a lot of different aspects of your life. And I really could relate to the fact that you were trying to carry on your career in all the caregiving that you were doing. And so that's why it's nice to still mention that. And I don't think of anything really in order. However, the beautiful human, I think that's the first thing. And then everything else is secondary to that. I have Dan's book in front of me, and I have thoroughly enjoyed reading this book, and I'd like to dive in. But before I do, why don't you help us set some context of your journey and why we're talking today? And spoiler alert, I think Dan's famous from the Telepathy tapes, my new favorite podcast.
Thank you. Yeah. So the context is that my wife, Denise, was diagnosed with Alzheimer's disease in 2012 when she was just 56 years old. And at that age is a shocker to a lot of people because a lot of people would just imagine Alzheimer's as an old person's disease. And it is entirely not that at all. There's been people diagnosed in their 30s and 40s with it. So nonetheless, it was a shock to us. And we began that journey. I had no idea about Alzheimer's. I take that back. I did know two things. One, that Denise would lose her memories from it, and that she would pass away from it. That was the only thing I knew about Alzheimer's. I couldn't even spell it. You know, I remember the day after the diagnosis, I wanted to learn more and had to get on and thank goodness for spelling autocorrect, because it got the right spelling of Alzheimer's so I could research it.
I've been there too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's crazy. So yeah, that began my 12-year plus journey with Denise and with Alzheimer's, and ultimately then communicating telepathically with her, which launched me into a whole new world that I just love being in this world and talking with you and with others about that ability and helping other caregivers. That is in my heart of hearts, the ultimate goal of being on podcasts. We're writing the book and in talking to people is to help other caregivers who might be going through this similar situation.
Yeah, well, what you do is you bring a lot of hope. And I should have, I already feel like I'm ready to cry. Where are my Kleenexes? I didn't think that would happen so quick. But I wrote to you and thinking that what you were doing was just so cool, and especially with my mom having rather advanced Alzheimer's now, and my dad having early mid-stage dementia, I'd say. I wrote to you because you had me at the telepathy side. I thought I'm super curious and I wanted to learn more. And then I immediately bought your book. Well, I'd been avoiding talking to the Alzheimer's associations, and those beautiful people were calling me and, checking in, and I didn't talk to them because I had my busy job taking care of my family and then trying to take care of my parents. And I was like, I am not ready for that breakdown that's going to ensue as soon as somebody starts showing me a little bit of compassion. So I picked up your book to read about the telepathy. And what it did was brought me through the journey of Alzheimer's, where I felt so seen. So many things in this book are experiences that, it's different being your spouse, so you would have seen it
Mhm.
daily compared to parents. But there's so much that anyone who's having any experiences with people with Alzheimer's or dementia can feel seen by reading your book. And it was just such a great entry point for me because I was so curious about the telepathy. So I was very surprised I thought I would just whip through all of that stuff and I didn't. I really enjoyed that journey that you talked about.
Yeah, I always, not always, I have learned to, look at that glass half full, right? And that was my overriding thought in caregiving for Denise was how can I make this a positive for her and for me? And that's the way I looked at the book too, is let's get these stories out. Let's talk about what is the disease, what it does to people, and what it can do to caregivers if the caregiver doesn't take care of themselves. And I'm glad to hear, it's it sounds like it's brought you out of your shell, right, a little
Yeah.
bit, and less afraid maybe to approach it and to help yourself in whatever way, learning more about the disease, talking to somebody else about it, because in doing that, you're ultimately helping your mom and dad.
Mhm.
And that's why we're here, right? I think anyway. So,
Well, and so many other people. And I found, your stories, some of them are so sad, but some of them are so positive as well. And you've got to laugh. You still have to laugh at some of this stuff. And
oh yeah.
oh, I've got so many things to talk to you about. And we need like 12 podcasts to go through all of this stuff. Well, first off, for people that don't know, can you just describe Alzheimer's? I love how you talk about it's like a rose. There's so many
hmm
different colors.
hmm Yeah, yeah. So dementia is the overriding overall term. Okay. And I relate that to a rose. And with it, so dementia being the rose, there are many different kinds and colors of roses. Alzheimer's disease is one of those colors, a yellow rose, say. Lewy body dementia is a red rose. And there are 4 or 5 different other forms of dementia, but they're all relate. They are all dementia. Okay, whether it's Alzheimer's, Lewy body, and they cause obviously a change in the brain in the way the neurons interact with each other and connect. And they cause the neurons to break down, and therefore you have things like memory loss, you have things like behavioral changes. One of the toughest forms is Lewy body's dementia, which causes a lot of, unfortunately, behavioral, specifically anger issues.
Mm,
And unfortunately, it's the caregiver that is lashed out at
yeah,
most
yeah.
of the time. Yeah, so there are a lot of different forms of dementia, with Alzheimer's disease being the most prevalent. It represents about somewhere around 60 or 70% of all cases of dementia. And so that's why it's talked about the most, and that is the form that I experienced that Denise had. Now, scientifically, what we're finding is that through autopsies at the end, is that oftentimes, most of the time actually, the person with dementia has 2 or more forms of dementia. They have Alzheimer's and something else,
Right.
which is really fascinating and is unfortunately making the diagnosis and the treatment and hopefully ultimately a cure a little more difficult because you've got these multiple dementias to treat. So that's
Mhm.
kind of the primer at the high level of what dementia is.
Yeah, my mom has Alzheimer's and my dad has vascular dementia.
There you go. Yeah. Yeah.
And I often wonder if he would be way less advanced if he hadn't taken such good care of my mom. In that my mom was struggling with Alzheimer's for a few years, but we were having a tough time getting a diagnosis. And we knew there was challenges there, but we were all busy in our lives and we didn't realize how much challenge was there. Um, and and my dad, I felt that he was, just he's English and he was doing the stiff upper lip thing and things are fine. And then we start looking back and you can see where things started. But then in 2019, my mom broke her hip and then it was a very quick fall into not very verbal. And then that stress on my dad and then COVID, and they were living on a farm, which was very isolating for them. And one thing that I thought really resonated with me that you said was that it's a caregiver's disease.
Yeah.
And I
Yeah.
was like, that was the first time I'd heard that. And can you tell us, when did you first hear that, or did you come up with that? How was that?
Hmm.
How was that journey for you?
Yeah, that was something I heard early on within the first few months of after the diagnosis was people kept saying, this is a disease of the caregiver. And I kept saying to myself anyway, no, it's not. It's something that Denise has.
Yeah.
And I kept hearing that over and over again. And after those first few months of knowing what was going on and trying to help her and me navigate this complex disease, I quickly realized, oh my gosh, it is. It's a disease of the caregiver. And it's so much a disease where, as the caregiver for someone with the disease, there is so much stress in your life that if you don't learn how to manage that and take care of yourself, guess what? You can't take care of your loved ones. And I remember learning early on this statistic that something like 2/3 of caregivers pass away before the person with dementia passes away.
Wow.
And that was like, whoa, whoa, I cannot let that happen, especially at this early age
Hmm.
for both of us. And so I learned techniques to take care of myself. And that's what I advocate today verbally, but also hopefully that comes through in the book too, is the caregiver has got to take care of themselves. And it does, I'll admit, Shannon, it does sound a little bit selfish, yet in this instance, it is absolutely not selfish. It's critical that the caregiver learn techniques to take care of themselves so that they can continue that wonderful loving care that they're giving their loved one.
Well, and you still need a livelihood, right? And
Yep.
you still have to human. And
Hmm.
yeah, I remember early on with my dad, he was calling me 5, 6 times a day.
Yeah.
And I had started a new job at one point, and I remember thinking, I am not taking any phone calls from my parents in the morning before I go to work because I need to show up in my best possible state, mental state, energetic state, all the
Mhm.
things. And I can't do it. I can't talk to them in the morning because it was such a mind bender. I just had to put some boundaries in there. And that's me who would see them, once a week or so. And that's not me living with them every day. Uh, But even people who are in that situation, there still needs to have some realization and some self-care there as well. So I can't imagine what it's like to be full-time living with someone with Alzheimer's.
Yeah. I wouldn't recommend it for anybody. It just, yeah, it was, I have some cuss words about it, but it was the toughest thing I've ever done in my life. And it's just when it's your spouse or let's face it, there are a lot of parents that live with their kids, that go
Mhm.
through it, and it's in your face every day. And it's such a challenge, patience challenge to, as you know, keep hearing that same question over and over again,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
just taking deep breaths. But yeah, and when you get that question, when are we going to the grocery store? And 5 minutes later, when are we going to the grocery store? And just, whew, it's tough. It is so tough. And that's the kind of stress that no one really anticipates. Um,
Well,
and there's so many manifestations of that stress, whether it be in hindsight, I say the memory issues are the least worst part of the disease. And that's sad in and of itself because there are so many other things that come up, whether it be a medication is not working, another condition comes up, whether it be, a heart-related condition, they fall, as in the case of your mom,
mhm.
that you just don't anticipate with dementia. And one of the worst ones for us, no, the worst one, I gotta say, was the crying episodes that Denise had.
Right. Oh, that must have just broke your heart.
Horrible, 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 horrible. And those around us, my caregiving team experienced that too. And it just, Shannon, it just started out of the blue one day. She just started crying. I go, what's wrong? And part of the disease process is they can't figure things out either. So she was not able to verbally express to me, oh, I'm depressed, or I'm sad about this, or I heard this on the radio and something's bothering me. None of that. And it was just crying. And it started off as once, maybe twice a day. And it grew to 3 or 4 times a
Oh,
day, Shannon, to the point where I kid you not, she would wake up in the morning crying.
oh, mm,
And it just broke my heart. And one of the wor I tell this story in the book too. One of the worst situations was she was crying. I was consoling her and saying this and that, and it just wasn't sinking in. And this was after about a month of the crying, and I was at a loss. I said, Denise, it's going to be okay. And she looked up at me and said, no, it's not.
no.
And I'm like, oh God, what do you
And
do?
do you think that she realized the impact of that statement, like actually when she said it? Because I think, when you say that to kids and you're like, it's going to be okay. And they're like, no, it's not. It's never going to be okay. Now, now, do you think that she realized really the depth of that it's not okay?
No, I think she did.
Oh,
The full depth of it. That it was bad now and that the disease was going to get worse. I think it was a little bit of a foretelling that no,
right.
it's not going to be okay.
Yeah, and I see
Ugh.
this. My parents are in a care home now or an assisted living. They, yeah, that's a bit of a journey, but anyways, and I see people who are crying quite regularly, and I don't even know them, but it's true to them what they're
Hmm.
feeling, and it
Hmm.
is just heartbreaking.
Yeah. Yeah. So the silver lining in that, and as a caregiver, it's all about, okay, doing something. I tell people, caregivers, don't stick your head in the sand. I didn't stick my head in the sand about, like the ostrich, about the crying. And I reached out to people and said, hey, this is going on. What can I do? And one of my good friends said, oh, you need to talk to Larry. I said, who is Larry? And she goes, Larry's one of the leading geriatric psychiatrists in the country. He's a friend of mine. Let me get an appointment with him. Within a week, I was in seeing Larry, both of us, describing it. And fortunately, Larry was great. Has the same smart ass sense of humor that I did. So he's joking around in there. I get it. Denise is laughing. And we just had this great interaction. And he said, okay, we're going to get you on this medication. We did, had it for about 2 weeks. It wasn't making that much of an impact on the crying. I called him, said, it's not doing much. And he goes, okay, let's get to this one. And it was the second one, bam, he hit it. It was like we just had to tweak the dosage, and the crying stopped. And I was like,
Oh,
Larry,
wow.
you are a miracle worker. And to this day, I hold him up on a pedestal because I don't know how I would have done it, had the crying continued. And so she continued on that medication almost up to the end of when she was finally so bad that it didn't matter anymore. But for
Right.
years, she was on that medication. So
Right.
yeah,
Well,
yeah.
yes, because being with somebody who's, well, just even not Alzheimer's, but being with someone who's chronically depressed
Hmm.
is so hard on the other person. I mean, it's hard for the person going through it, but it's so hard to wake up beside a black cloud.
Yeah. Yeah. And that truth be told, so many, if I would venture to say this is not scientific, but most Alzheimer's or dementia patients get depressed and are clinically diagnosed as having depression and get on an antidepressant because again, they're aware. They know
Interesting.
they know what's going on and where it's going. So I get the fact that they get depressed. So uh,
Yeah. So when was it in your journey that you were able to get some hope, let's say? Was there much hope before you got that telepathic communication with Denise?
I would say it came yes, and it came in the form of help,
Right.
caregiving help, right?
Yeah.
Because as you mentioned, I was still working full time and 40 to 60 hours a week trying to while caring for Denise.
And
Um, th-
having your whole life fall apart, right? Your whole
yeah,
plans for your future,
yeah,
everything just go up in smoke.
everything,
Never
and
mind
I'm,
the mental load of that.
oh, it would the physical, I say, we went from a two-income family to Denise's income going away and expenses going way up.
Yeah.
So the stress of that, but then trying to figure out this whole caregiving thing was crazy. But I remember people saying, and the experts and the advice I got from the Alzheimer's Association, get help. Don't turn people away. And I didn't. And thank goodness,
Thank goodness.
our son lived a mile and a half away. He and his wife came over and would give me breaks. Denise's siblings, she has seven siblings. They would come into town, and none of them lived here, but yet once a month, one of them would come and give me a weekend off. And that was such a big break. And I availed myself to support groups, and we went to those support groups where both of us participated. Those were great. So those were the little bits of hope that I had that we're going to make it through this disease better than other people who don't avail themselves to that kind of help. Yeah.
Yeah, and especially when people are older and get the disease, they're not as inclined to accept the help. I think of my dad. I tried to get Nurse Next Door to come in. I tried to get them years before anything was really going funny to move closer to town, to downsize. And yet they pretended to look, but never did. And then
Mm,
getting help, it was just out of the question. And then
yeah.
when my mom broke her hip, then she needed some, like there was public health care that came in a few times to help her out there at the early stages. But after that was up, there was just no way. My dad was, no, we're fine. I can do this.
Hmm.
And because I wasn't in it every day, I didn't see how not fine. But then we eventually started looking for retirement homes for them and went down that path.
Yeah, Shannon, I wish we could crack that code because it's something of that generation. And I'm not being critical. It's just the way they grew up. Here in the States, the Depression era kids. That's what we
Yeah,
call them. and where you just, you picked yourself up off the ground and you did things for yourself, for your family. You didn't question about it, you just did it. And I've got to survive, and I've got to be tough no matter what. I've got to be tough, and I'm going to get through this. And that was the mentality of people, that grew up, again, 30s, 40s, who are now in their 70s, 80s, even 90s.
Yeah.
And they say, oh, I don't, Alzheimer's, pff, no, it's my wife said, till death do us part. I am going to take care of her. And it's like, no, don't do that to yourself. This disease is like no other. And I just wish there was a way. I'm still trying to figure that out, how to get through to them that it is not something you can do by yourself. I availed myself to all the help I could get. And I still had health issues. I mean, at the end, two or 3 years after she passed away, I got prostate cancer. And obviously I've since, I got rid of that
Well
and am
done.
healthy, but I attribute that cancer to the stress of caregiving.
Right.
So I can't imagine if I was, 20 years older, in my 80s, and coming down with that. It would have been a mess. So even someone healthy like myself, who took care of himself, support groups, still did yoga, still worked out, took on walks and things like that, I got sick from it. And so it's something that I wish, again, I got to figure out a way to get through to your parents' generation of taking better care of themselves. Maybe we figure that out
Yeah.
together, Shannon. I don't
That
know.
sounds good. Sounds
Okay.
good. Well, you can't get rid of me now, Dan.
Oh, good.
And so maybe um, talking a little bit about um, that first moment when Denise came through to you in a way that you didn't suspect, and you were exhausted.
Mhm.
You were spending 30 minutes more trying to get her on the toilet, and 30 or more minutes trying to get her in the car. And boy, I've got funny stories about that too. But tell me, how did that go for you? What?
Yeah. Yeah. So yeah, it was at a time that was one of the worst things, was just with her Alzheimer's. She was always a very verbal, active, physically active person, and that shut down real quickly. She lost her ability to communicate effectively and lost ability to coordinate arms, legs, muscles. And gosh, getting her into the bathroom was a chore. Get her in there, and she would just stare at the toilet and not know what to do. And like you said, Shannon, it was sometimes, from the time we entered the door into the bathroom to the time we were done, it was 30 to sometimes 60 minutes. And I'm like,
Wow.
this is crazy. And same with getting her in the car. In and out of the car was just an amazingly difficult chore. So yeah, I this was probably so 2015, 3+ years into the diagnosis, and it had been an exceptionally hard day at work. And I came home and made her dinner and answered the same questions over and over again a few times. And fortunately, she was a person that liked to go to bed early and fell asleep and stayed asleep almost 12 hours. It was amazing. And because not all Alzheimer's people do that, some wander at night. And unfortunately, I didn't have that. So I put her to bed. I went back out and had a glass of wine, and then had another glass of wine, and then had a third. No, I'm kidding. Probably at least two, to relax. Got tired, went to bed, but just, it was a tough day at work, as I mentioned, and just really frustrated with the disease and the fact that so much time. Now, it wasn't just the time factor of getting her into the bathroom, but it was just the frustration. We're just like going like this at each other, and all I'm trying to do is get you on the toilet. Oh, it was so frustrating. So anyway, I'm getting crawling to bed. She's fast asleep, deep, deep, deep sleep, and I'm just sitting there going, and I had the thought in my head, Denise, this would be so much easier if you could just talk to me. And sorry, this is still emotional to me 10 plus years after the fact. In my mind, in my mind's eye, I heard her voice say, well, talk to me. And I'm like, and I knew it was her voice. It wasn't some, just me making this up. It was her voice, the intonation of her voice, her cadence of her voice. And I looked down at her and she's fast asleep. And I thought, well, okay, I'll talk to you. One of the biggest issues right now, Denise, is getting you on the toilet. How do we do that so that it's easier for you and for me? And she showed me pictures of how to do it. She goes, put your hand here, put your hand, other hand there, put pressure there, and do this. And she's showing me pictures of this in my mind's eye. I'm like, okay, thank you. I went to sleep. And funny perspective on this, I got up the next morning and I am really looking forward to getting her in the bathroom. I got to try this out, right? So I get her up and I'm like, Denise, come on, come on, come on, let's go. And so I get her in, do exactly what she had showed me to do. Less than 5 minutes, she's sitting, and I get her on the toilet, and I'm like, yes, yes. And she looks up and she goes, get out. And I'm like, it worked. It worked. And so the next night, that night, same thing. I said, okay, Denise, you there? And she goes, yep. I said, we're still having trouble getting you in the car. And again, same thing, 5, 10, 15, 20 minutes just to, she's standing there at the car door, not getting in. And so she showed me again, telepathically, do this, do that, push here, push there. She even showed me, goes, like how the cops get people in the car, they put their, push their head down. Do that if you have to. And I said, okay. So again, the next day, bam, 30 seconds, she's in the car. And I'm like, yes, this time I close the door and I'm walking around the back of the car, doing my victory dance. So she didn't have to yell at me for that.
Oh,
And it just made it so easy. And then just other thing, that just kept going. And I kept asking her questions telepathically, is there anything you want to do more of? And she goes, car rides. I want to go out in the car. I'm like, okay, that's cool. And so I'd take her out, roll the windows down, and her hair's flying, and she's just got a big smile on her face. I could tell she really liked that. I asked her, what do you want to eat? What do you don't want to eat? Is there anybody you want to see? Visit with, and so it just kept going, and my role as caregiver became so much easier. It's not easy, but it became
yeah,
easier.
yeah. Oh, I just even think of the just there's so many stories, right? But my mom had come over for Christmas and stayed overnight, and my mom and dad, and getting my mom to shower was a 2 hour exercise.
Yeah.
And yeah, and there, I mean, that it was exhausting. And so I just can't imagine what that's like to live with every day. Um,
Yeah.
but having that insider scoop is is incredible. It doesn't take away, you still have to go through the motions of your life, but there must have been part of you that was like, this is so cool. But you
Oh,
you had done Reiki before that, right? So you were familiar with energy, but not
yeah.
familiar with this.
Yeah, it was, I describe it as a really an unfolding over decades, right? Because I grew up in a very, well, let's call it what it was, Catholic dogma, right? My parents were very ardent Catholics. And so I followed that narrow dogma. And it wasn't until they passed away that I kind of grew and starting studying things like Reiki, like shamanic breath work, meditation, and even channeling. I even started doing some channeling. And so it was this over literally decades, right? That kind of broadened my perspective, broadened my horizon, broadened my awareness of something greater out there that's not defined narrowly by a religious dogma. And so by accepting all of those practices and doing those practices made it much easier to believe when Denise said, talk to me, that it was Denise and it was her higher self. Also, I say that concept, that's their soul, their higher self, same thing. I believe that was who was communicating with me and believed it and embraced it and took advantage of it. And so it was, but it wasn't, yes, it happened over the course of one night initially, yet it was this unfolding over decades and blossoming of a belief system that I think caused it to happen.
Yeah, it was like you were building these little, I don't know, I want to say bridges, but no, I think not. I think it's probably more like a foundation. Foundations were being laid
That's what I
to
use. Yes, yes. It's like building a house.
yeah.
The practices were the foundation, of the house. And, as I added on, the lumber went up, the framing went up, the roof went up, and it became, a complete house, so to speak.
And
Although that
I
house
feel like
continues
that,
to grow.
yeah, I feel like the telepathy is like the skylights.
There you go. Oh, I like that. Oh, I like that. Can I use that?
Absolutely.
I love it.
Yeah, that just coming through. But it does feel like such a journey that you went on. And I'm so glad that you're sharing it and that you're able to use this story as a bridge for people to just be open to the fact that we may not know everything and there may be other possibilities out there. And you never know how you could help, how your loved one could help.
Hmm.
That's just so neat. So you said you just knew, and I love that there was just this knowing because I think so many of us have constant chatter in our heads. It's like our mind doesn't shut up
Hmm.
a lot of the time. And so for you, that was definitely not your inner voice chatter. So for
Right.
somebody who's looking to recognize that, it was very different from the way your normal inside voice sounded.
Oh, very much so. And like I said, it was definitely Denise's voice that I hear. And over the years, I've learned as other people have come in telepathically, I learned to differentiate. And it's very easy now to differentiate, oh, I'm talking to so and so versus, oh, that's just the chatter in my head. I've
Right.
learned to, in part because I've learned to quiet that chatter. I think the chatter is good. It's as long as it's coming from, you're listening to the source of the chatter, your intuition, you follow your intuition and you accept your intuition and execute on your intuition, so to speak. But I've learned to interpret and understand that so and so is coming through at this point. Case in point, my dad started coming. If I can go down that little
Oh,
story,
absolutely.
I have a feeling that was probably one of your bookmarks was the story about my dad.
Well,
But anyway,
I do love that story. I've got so many
yeah, if you
bookmarks.
want to, yeah,
This
go
is
where you
a
want to go. Yeah,
well,
you
I
got a
love
few.
that story about your dad, and I loved how that opened it up, how things opened up. Um, I do want to ask you about how you're doing that work for other people now.
Yeah,
But one of the moments in your book that was so beautiful that I just loved was the part. Oh, I don't even know if I can do this part because I'll probably cry. But when you put her into care, I think, and you went back to see how she was doing. And as you were leaving, you said, I received a telepathic message from her. You did good. Thank you. um, wow,
yeah,
that is such a heartbreaking moment for anybody's journey
yeah,
is to leave them in care.
yeah, yeah.
That was just I mean, that is golden. That is just so special.
Absolutely. And you know, it flashes me back to the very first day that we got home from the diagnosis, and I said, we need to talk, because I knew she did not have long to talk. And at near the end of that conversation, she looked at me tearfully and she said, do not put me in one of those places, meaning memory care. And at the time, I didn't know the term for this, but I told her a therapeutic lie. I said, I will not do that to you, right? Because I didn't want to, I didn't want to have an argument on the first day of the diagnosis, but I knew that's probably where we're going to end up.
Yeah.
And so I told her that therapeutic lie. And so to fast forward to placing her in a memory care community, and then to get that message, just literally, I didn't ask for it, but out of the blue, she validated um, the work I had been doing, and that this was the right place, the right time, and the right way to go about it with her. And she wasn't angry at me or anyone else that I had placed her in memory care. So that was, like you say, so validating and so heartwarming.
Oh,
Yeah.
yeah. I mean, just such a moment, right? Like,
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and that's, what I find with a lot of when I communicate with the higher selves of those with dementia, I'm communicating with a source that is that person, certainly. Yet who I'm communicating with is so much about love,
yeah,
right? And they look at us with love, and they want us, as the caregiver, to take care of ourselves. And it's okay if you have to put me in memory care, because you're doing it out of a place of love, at least that if that's what it's done out of. And other things that you may do are really, we're trying to do things out of love of our heart, and they reflect that love back. Yes, you're doing great. You're doing this out of love, and I love you
yeah.
because you're coming from that place.
And I love that, when you brought that up in the book also, and just said it now about the therapeutic lie. I didn't get good at that until I saw my dad going through similar stages as my mom. Because when my mom started, I was still in denial and I was like, what is going on with you? Like, whoa. And so I would tell her the truth. And often things would just be super upsetting. And I realized, well, that was a mistake. But I kept making these mistakes, or I'd just um, I don't want to say argue with her, but not agree. And well, if I could turn back time and do anything, that's what I would do. Is I would do a heck of a lot more of those therapeutic lies, and I've done a much better job with my dad
Hmm.
on that. And because it allows you to keep the peace with them, keep the peace in your heart, and your telling the truth is not going to change anything in so many cases. And what is that? The truth truth without compassion is cruelty. I'd heard this quote,
Oh, yeah.
but it is almost cruel to tell them the truth if they're not going to be able to grasp it anyways.
Yeah, I was told early on one of the best caregiver tools is that therapeutic lie. And why argue with them? And I see
Yeah.
it saddens me when I see caregivers arguing with somebody who has dementia. And I quickly adopted a saying that I had on my own, and I think I said it in the book as well. And I tell people, my new definition of insanity is arguing with an Alzheimer's patient. I mean, how stupid is that?
Yeah.
You're never ever win. And all that does is it just builds up that anger in that person, which is because of their memory is going to come back around. That anger keeps coming back around and around and around. And you're going to just what are you going to do? You could keep arguing with them? No. Tell them a therapeutic lie.
Yeah. It's so
And yeah, it's tough to learn sometimes, but fortunately adopted it pretty early on. I don't know what that says about me, but anyway.
Well, you're probably a quick learner, Dan, quick
There you
study.
go. Thank you. Thank you. There's the positive. Thank you.
And then, so you have started working with other people who have
Yes.
Alzheimer's. Can you tell us a little bit about that and when that started?
Yeah, yeah. It started within a couple of years of talking to Denise. I had placed her, one of the first instances was I had placed her in memory care. And just one of the reasons I chose the community that I did was because of the memory care director, the person that ran memory care. Her name is Kelly. We're friends till to today. Love Kelly. And I sensed that she would accept the fact that I was communicating telepathically with Denise. And so I sat in her office one day, we're talking about Denise's care, and I said, okay, I'm going to do it. I'm going to tell her about my communication. And she's sitting there listening intently. And I get done, and she goes, my sister has been silent since she was a kid. Do you think you could talk to her? I'm like, sure. So I went back and got some readings from her sister, what, and things she likes to do and not do. And I
So
told
was that
Kelly,
your first one?
yeah, yeah.
Wow. How did you know you could tap into her sister?
Well, because I had also been talking to my dad, as I
Oh, right,
mentioned,
at that point.
right?
Okay.
And who had passed away 20, 30 years
Right, we
prior.
skipped that part. We
Okay, I'll come back. I'll come back. I'll make the Kelly thing really quick. So anyway, Kelly bought into it, totally believed it without a doubt. And I said to her, hey, if there's somebody else you're having trouble with here in the community, let me know. I'll see what I can do. She goes, okay. A few weeks go by. She comes up to me and she goes, hey, we're having some trouble with George. He's just agitated, and George is the nicest guy, never had a problem with him, agitated, whatnot. I said, well, let me see what I can do. So I went back. I had to leave the community. I had to get out because the energy there is so low. I could not communicate telepathically. So I had to get out of the community, go back and read. I read George. He said, I want somebody to read the Bible to me. I'm like, okay, any particular chapters and verses? And he gave me two chapters and verses specifically. And I go back, I tell Kelly this, and she goes, okay, you know what? He does have a Bible on his bedstand, and we'll start reading it to him. Like, great. So I walk out of her office, go over, I'm leaving for a meeting. I bend over to kiss Denise goodbye, said, I'll be back. And I stand up. George is standing next to me with his Bible open.
and you'd never met George.
Well, I'd seen him in the
Oh,
community,
okay. Okay.
right? But I never knew he liked reading the Bible, never knew he had a Bible. But his physical self knew that I had been communicating with his higher self. And he came over to validate, yeah. And it was like that look on his face, like, can you read this to me now? And I said to him, hey, George, I know what you want, but I got to go to this meeting. And I took him over to a caregiver and said, can you read him this? And it was like, I didn't, Shannon, I didn't need the validation,
Yeah,
but there it was, right?
right.
So my
But
dad, do you want me? Go ahead.
how lovely that the staff essentially got that validation.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
So
that's nice.
to fast forward, yeah. So that kind of was the jumping off place that thought, you know what? I want to start doing this with other caregivers and their loved ones. And so I started soul to soul communication. I have a website. I offer the telepathic communication and consultation to other people. Since the telepathy tapes broadcast, that has taken off like crazy good. And I tell people, at the beginning of the session, I come at it from two different perspectives. Both places where I hope I'm helping you is obviously I'll communicate telepathically with your loved one. Yet I also have the practical experience of caring for someone for 12 years who had the disease. So I'm going to tell you some practical things, physical things that you could be doing or stop doing that, kind of thing. Get into a support group, things of that nature. So
You're
it's
the
a, it's
full
a
package, Dan.
full package. Yeah, thank you. Thank you. So anyway, And that's been obviously heartwarming. And I even offered, somebody said, can you teach me how to do this? And I said, yes. So I'm starting to take on students
Oh,
who want to learn
amazing.
telepathic communication. Yeah, that's
Amazing.
fun.
I bet. And so why don't you tell me about your dad really quick,
Yeah, yeah,
and then I've got a couple more things and then we can wrap up.
absolutely. So my dad had passed away a good 20 years, 1985, at least a decade before I even met Denise. So all she knew about him was a few pictures and a few stories. They'd never met, never met. I started communicating with Denise telepathically. And then my dad started coming in. And it's like, oh my God, this is so heartwarming because he passed away when I was 26. I really didn't get to know him too well. So I'm talking to him and he's loving it. He's communicating, telling me, I'm asking him he was a very bright mechanical engineer, business person. So I would ask him a lot of business type questions and he'd guide me this way, that way. And then all of a sudden, I started seeing he and Denise together. And my dad loved fast sports cars, and Denise likes anything fast. And so they would be riding in these sports cars, top down, smiling, Denise's blonde hair flying in the wind, just having a great time. And again, real heartwarming to me. Okay. This is all telepathically. I'm
Yeah.
seeing these sights. Okay. So one night I'm putting Denise to bed, lay her down. I was about to read her a story. She loved hearing stories. She looks up at me, sits up in bed, and says to me, I'm really looking forward to getting to know your dad. And I'm like, whoa. Again, it was validation I didn't need, but it was clear, here's the physical self, Denise, who was in a pretty big cloud of dementia and had this moment of clarity about what was going on the other side. And I'm like,
Right.
this stuff is real. This is going to get
Oh,
fun.
right. That's beautiful.
Yeah, love
Yeah.
it. Yeah.
Oh, that's so nice. And it does give a lot of hope to people. And I know for some people it's tough even when presented with that. And we won't go into it, but one of the pages in your book, my note beside it was just ugh. And it was sort of people who didn't want to be open to what was right in front of them. And so I just wrote
Yeah.
ugh.
I know what you're talking about. The George and the
Yeah.
Dream.
And
Yeah. The dream
anyone who's
thing. Yeah.
listening can read the book. It's a
Yeah.
good one.
But yeah, not everybody's open to it. And I get it. We're not all that far along the path as we may be.
Yeah,
You just got to throw it
exactly.
out there. I throw it out there, and if it helps, it helps. If it doesn't, we'll just try again another way or just move
Right.
on.
It might be just not right now.
Yeah,
Maybe it's right
exactly.
now and it resonates with you, or not right now, maybe later, or maybe never. But you never know what seeds you're planting that are going to bloom at some point in the future,
Exactly.
and
Exactly.
just be that great launch pad into just so much more.
Hmm.
And so maybe to wrap up, unless there's something that I've
Oh, do we
missed
have
or
to? Do we have to? I'm having so much fun, Shannon.
well,
Anyway,
me
sorry.
too. Or if there's any stories that you really want to share that I've missed, or
Wow.
I did want you to share some parting wisdom for people. If there's anything that you'd like to tell somebody at this stage. And I know you've done some guidance for people. I'm trying to think of where this one was. Oh, this lovely guy, Tom, who was feeling a little lost and confused about his path in life. So I'm stealing your piece of wisdom, but you're welcome to add to it.
No, no, please go. Please go.
So
Yes.
one of the things that you said was, I think this was you remember being in your 20s and feeling as if the choice you had to make was so determinant of what you would be doing for the rest of your life. Wisdom, experience, and age have taught me that this is not the case. The most important path is the one that makes your heart sing, and the universe will help you get there and thrive. And
Yeah,
I love that.
big yes. In that particular case, Tom was confused about, not so much confused, but just wasn't sure, how do I go? What do I do? Do I go to college? Do I do this? Do I do that? And I reminded him during my session with him that, you know what, even though we may not be certain, we make a choice, that choice is not determining what happens the rest of our life. It's going to determine what you may do in the near term, but it doesn't mean that you have to keep doing what you're doing. And you're making, hopefully, and I've learned this a lot of times the hard way, to follow my heart. And when I do that, boy, things just line up and the
Yeah.
world opens up and is so much more fun generally. Right, there's always some bumps in the road, but yeah. And it's interesting, I know that we didn't talk about this, but I was on another podcast. Well, I think I mentioned Doug Bites to you, where
Yes.
he has,
Hopefully he'll join us on this podcast too.
yeah, really cool. He has men on his show that are following their intuition. That's what men who follow their intuition. And I'm like, yes, and his premise is, if a man would follow his intuition one time a day, we'd have a better world. And I'm like, I love that. And that's what I try and tell people is follow your heart, not your head, because things will open up for you so much easier and life will be so much easier. And it's lessons that I had to learn over the decade. I got a distinct telepathic message a few months ago. They showed me just the door opening. And well, guess what? The telepathy tapes came in, Shannon came in, Doug Bites came in, and this thing is going crazy good. So, yeah, follow your intuition passionately.
Oh, I love it. I love it. Is there anything else you want to leave anyone with? I know that advice, that wisdom can be applied certainly to caregivers as well.
Absolutely. And I would say, my message to caregivers is almost always don't do this alone. You cannot,
Yeah.
and specifically for someone who's caring for an Alzheimer's patient, right? Don't do this alone. Oh, reach out, get help. When people offer help, take it. Call the Alzheimer's Association. They have an 800 number that I used one time. It's 24/7, 365 days a week. I called them once at 4 in the morning because of an issue I was having with Denise. I reached out. And so I recognized early on I couldn't do this by myself. And so I say that to other caregivers, don't do this, don't isolate, reach out, accept help, and you'll be a better caregiver and your loved one will acknowledge that.
Yeah. Well, that is beautiful. Thank you so much for being on the podcast today. I have just loved our discussion, and I'll put your details down in the show notes. So if anyone wants to get in touch with you, they'll know where to go.
Thank
And
you.
that was just such a wonderful conversation. So thank you so much for being such a delightful and informative and mind-opening guest.
Great. Thank you for having me. And hopefully it helps. I always say if it helps one person, then great. I'm very happy with that. And hopefully it's helped more than that, more than one. But I really hope we can do this again sometime because I really enjoy talking with you. And I'm going to keep checking in on your mom and dad too.
Oh, well, thank you. Thank you so much. I hope you enjoyed that conversation with Dan. I know I loved it and it was so informative. And I hope this episode was able to open people's minds up to possibilities. If you are interested in hearing more about this, check out Dan's book, Unforgettable, Unbelievable, A Journey of Telepathy and Compassion in Alzheimer's Care. I really enjoyed this book. It's an easy, interesting read. And let me know what you think in the comments and if you would be interested in hearing from more people that have had this kind of experience. I know that I'm just fascinated by this and have told every caregiver I know, particularly at my mom and dad's nursing home, about this, just because I think this opens up a whole new paradigm of what can be available to us. So if you enjoyed the episode, please, as always, like, follow, subscribe. It really helps more people find this content. And I am so grateful for your beautiful interactions and your questions and comments to me. If you have any thoughts about what you've heard today, let me know. Share in the comments or send me a message. Have a great week, everyone, and see you next Monday.